even though you're paying for something that's fast and cheap, you're still expecting it to be legitimate. There's a lot of trickle effects when you're providing services to somebody who thinks that you're legitimate and that SOC 2 report is good.
Welcome to Trust Issue by BEMO, the podcast where we go beyond checkbox compliance and get real about security. In every episode, we will break down what's happening in the world of CMMC, cybersecurity, and GRC, straight from the people building, auditing, and living it. Real conversation about real security.
Stumbled upon some interesting news today, and it's very closely related to some of the things that we've been talking about in previous episodes regarding cutting corners, compliance as a checklist exercise, not taking it seriously, just sort of using it to earn business and stuff like that. We came across a post by Troy Fine. And to be clear, this is not anything that's official as of yet. We're just sort of using it as fodder because I think it opens up a more interesting discussion regarding, and I quote, he says, details have emerged regarding a widespread SOC 2 fraud scheme involving an automation platform and audit firms rubber stamping reports. A compliance platform reportedly used an automated generator to churn out identical reports across multiple different companies. These reports were allegedly rubber stamped by partner audit firms with no actual verification of the company's security controls.
It has finally started. I think a lot of people really thought if this day would ever come. Obviously, it's not like front page news, and there's like nothing is final or really the details haven't emerged. But I feel like a lot of people in the compliance space has thought that something like this was going on with some companies, and they didn't really know who it was or where it was happening, but it just seemed like there's a lot of like a gold rush happening right now, and that there were companies out there that were trying to take advantage of that gold rush.
100%. It's funny that this comes today because I actually had two conversations today that were somewhat related to this. So I'll tell you about the first one. The first one, there was a company who is in a very, very urgent need to go and get compliant because they're trying to do business in the new market. In order to do that, they are expecting a lot of requests for them to show some sort of compliance framework. So naturally, the one that I recommended was SOC 2 because of just where they're doing business and so on and so forth. And there was a lot of just pressure during the meeting to find whatever solution would be the fastest.
Whoa. Okay.
That's one conversation that I had today, which I think is one of the reasons that this is happening. Because what you find is that there's a lot of startups who are trying to go mid-market and enterprise really, really fast because they have a good product. And in order to do that, they're finding that they have pressure to get something like a SOC 2 in place. And so because there's a strong need on the market for that, whether it's realistic or not, to go and get this done really, really fast, there are going to be people and companies that are going to want to do that. And so I think that that's one of the reasons that this is sort of emerged. The second conversation that I had today, which is somewhat related to this, is that I was speaking to a CISO who was just riding the bus the other day, and he saw an advertisement while he was riding the bus that promised compliance in a certain time frame. A very, very small time frame.
Sure.
And he told me verbatim, he's like, that's the most ridiculous thing that I've read.
Yeah, man. I feel like a lot of people in this space, whether it's the implementers, some of the auditors who've been doing this for a long time or doing things the right way, have just sort of been scratching their head for a long time being like, I don't get it. How is it that I'm doing this the correct way? I feel like there's a lot of people doing things the correct way who are just like, how are these people doing it that quickly? I've been doing this for 30 years or 50 years, not 50 years, 20 years or whatever. And they can't seem to figure out like how they can go that much quicker. And I think there's always the conversation of like, the old school way of doing things, and like maybe it's just a market that's being innovated on, right? We've kind of talked about that in the past, that there's a lot of credibility to that type of conversation. But I think the speed of which that the compliance market was moving was almost at the same speed as like the overall like AI market is moving, which is just like, every day you wake up something new about Claude, something new about ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever. And sort of these compliant GRC platforms were moving at the same speed. And obviously it does, there's a connection there because they're taking advantage of AI and all that stuff. But it just seemed like things were just moving too quickly.
100%, right? I think as with all things, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And so for sure, you don't need to go and spend, I had one conversation where the guy was spending 3 times on a SOC 2 audit what many other really, really good reputable firms that we work with charge. And the company is literally 20 people, but they're charging 3 times the amount for the audit for something that does not in any way need to be that thorough or anything like that. Like, trust me, they're not in a crazy industry. There's no like special anything. It's a lot of very manual, old school types of ways to do the audit so that boost the price up.
They're probably just working with a huge, huge firm.
Yeah. And that's totally fine. So there is this pressure to do something in the compliance space to get away from that. Right. And so how do you become competitive when you're bringing a product to market? Well, you're either going to do it faster, cheaper, better, whatever. And so if you're really keying in on these startup types of folks who have this immense pressure to go and get this thing quickly, and they don't have the resources to do it, they don't have the time, they don't have the expertise, what sounds really good to them? Hey man, you can get this thing done really fast and easy and cheap. And then you can just keep going and sell your solution, and nobody's ever going to stop you or anything like that. And so what I think is finally happening is that there's being pushback now to say, hey guys, like what we've seen is the community as a whole is saying, hey guys, that's not cool, because that is undermining the people who are doing actual good work and doing things correctly and trying to make this a standard that's worth adhering to, right?
What do you think happens now? Like, do you think the AICPA does something about this or changes rules, or what do you think? What do you think even happens to all the like clients of either the GRC platform or those auditors? Like, are they just going to receive an email from the AICPA that basically like your report is fraudulent and like they should take this seriously? And what does that do to all the vendors that company has shown all their SOC 2 reports to? Like, are they now like, for example, most companies aren't going to know about this even after the news comes out with all the official, details. Most CISOs or directors of IT probably aren't going to remember the names of this GRC platform and that auditor. And then when they get their next SOC 2 report, they're like, oh, actually, it just so happens to be that your SOC 2 report is fraudulent. Like, I don't know that the IT community is that discerning unless it becomes like front page news, right?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I imagine that there's going to be a lot of very upset customers, because even though you're paying for something that's fast and cheap and all of that stuff, you're still expecting it to be legitimate, right? How much education went into from the sales rep to the customer telling them, kind of what they're actually getting? Because the expectation of the customers that they're getting something legitimate, that needs to be honored, right? So you're probably going to have a ton of upset customers from both the auditor and the compliance platform because of how this worked out. And so there may be a ripple effect there where that company sends something out and they basically say, hey, here's what's going on. And then those companies probably will tell companies that they work with who depended on that report, like, hey, we found this out, we're course correcting, this is what we're doing. It's just a mess, right? Like there's a lot of like trickle effects when you're providing services to somebody who thinks that you're legitimate and that SOC 2 report is good, right? there's also an argument to be made about doing your due diligence. And I think that is valid as well. So on one hand, sure, shame on the people who are just dishing these things out, but also shame on the people who are taking it at face value and not actually reading the report or doing any deeper due diligence before working with somebody who could be a mission critical part of their tech infrastructure. So I think it is just a messy situation overall, and something that we've been talking about needs to be remedied at some point, right? It can't keep continuing the way that it's been continuing, because it brings everybody down.
Yeah.
The people who are doing good work, the standards themselves. It's been a long time coming for sure.
What do you do with all the employees of those companies, right? Like I'd imagine, I mean, I don't know. I guess they're probably not like a huge reputable firm. They're probably, I guess, my best guess is when the details do come out, it's going to be like some startup that emerged in the last like 3 years, and it's going to be some auditing firm that also emerged in the last 3 years. And it's going to be one of those things where it's like registered in Panama or like some of those like shady details that are like, oh my God, these guys are a legit company. Like, how do they even get a license to do this?
That's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, right? It's not just affecting the companies that do business, but also the employees that work at those companies, right? It's a messy situation.
Yeah. And it sounds like the details from this were that it wasn't like a whistleblower. I mean, I guess we'll find out more later, but it sounds like it's not like a whistleblower situation where, they went to, they came out to the public about this, or to an organization about this, but that it just happened kind of by accident, right? They accidentally shared, I guess some Google Doc link that was publicly available from an access perspective, that anybody could just like see what was going on. And based off of that, it was determined that all these customers had essentially fraudulent SOC 2s, and that the tool was just generating a bunch of, similar or identical reports, and weren't really taking much of the underlying assets or evidence for any value.
Yeah, I was definitely not intentional. There was
Damn.
somebody done goof somewhere, and and should have never seen the light of day. But before we kind of talk about what companies can do to ensure that they're not doing business in that way, or that they're not, dealing with a illegitimate report, I had another call today that told me something interesting we haven't even talked about yet.
Okay.
As we think about these compliance automation platforms coming out, and we love them, we use them, the good ones. That's to say, we find them to be a really valuable tool as we go about going to get customer SOC 2, ISO, et cetera. It does stand to say that there is a market that is competitive there, and companies are trying to really, really innovate and do interesting things. So I thought that this was interesting. There's now an open source compliance automation platform.
Okay.
And the name is really, really interesting as well. It is called GigaChad GRC.
What? GigaChad?
GigaChad GRC. GigaChad GRC.
Oh,
So I got the original post. It's coming from a guy named Chad F. And he says, today, this is as of 3 weeks ago, today I'm open sourcing GigaChad GRC, a complete governance, risk, and compliance platform I built from the ground up. Why? Because I got tired of watching GRC vendors charge enterprise prices for basic functionality and then lock essential features behind premium tiers. So GigaChad GRC includes 7 microservices covering the full compliance lifecycle, policy management, risk assessments, vendor reviews, control mapping, evidence collection, so on and so forth. No feature gates, no contact sales for pricing, just clone the repo and go.
Wow.
I think we're sort of reaching an interesting point with the compliance automation platform. They've been around for a while. A lot of people are using them. A lot of people are saying, hey man, maybe I can kind of...
What does that say about like just fundamentally how potentially easy it is to clone any of these GRC platforms? That it's not that sophisticated of software?
It's been something that we've thought about. I know at least you and me have talked about this just on the side. that there's a lot of very, very intelligent CISOs that we know that don't use those platforms.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And they don't want to use those platforms either. And so either there's something that they're completely missing, which is probably not true, or there's something that inherently just is true, that there are other ways to go about doing this, and it's not necessarily an essential piece of your toolkit, although we have found it to be helpful. There may be some other things that you can do to achieve similar things without having to pay 30, 40, 50K per year, depending on your company size.
No, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, I think unfortunately for the company that we work for, we're very tied to, particular vendors, right? We have a particular philosophy, or I should say it's almost just like the methodology around how we do things, and using open source software just isn't part of that strategy. But yeah, I mean, power to you. Like, I would love to get my hands on it just to see what it's like. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's always equivalent software between open source and, for-profit SaaS VC-backed companies. But yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think maybe the name is just not so good it's just not so conducive for being well respected. Kind of like a meme. It basically sounds like a meme coin.
I mean, I think that's probably intentional in the sense that they're kind of punking the compliance automation platform market in and of itself and saying, hey, you guys think you're so cool. Well,
Yeah.
I have an open source version. Now, we haven't played with it or done anything like that as of yet, but I do think it is related to this conversation in the sense that there is market pressure that is on there. And amidst all of the innovation, we're now, at least for the first time I'm seeing, people that are coming out and saying, hey, I have a free version that you can use.
So does nobody work there's just the one dude that works there? Like, I mean, typically with open source software, there's lots of people who are contributors, right?
I'm not completely sure. There's a list of individuals that are listed there in that post, which we'll put in the show notes as well, that either aided or inspired
Sick.
the creation of this. So I think that as we continue to see how this story plays out, the first one that we talked about, it is worth mentioning that in general, there's a lot of interesting things that are happening in this space. And we're seeing a bit of a leveling of the playing field start to emerge with things like that. And so if that can be something that is fully functional, I think that it puts pressure on other platforms to try to innovate and show why they demand the price tag that they do pay for.
I think well said. Very curious as though, companies like Vanta and Drata, obviously the two biggest players in this game, kind of see an entry like that, whether they take it seriously, and kind of what that does from a competition perspective. I mean, I'm a very capitalist kind of guy. I love competition, and I think the competition typically just makes the products better. It'll just push the other GRC platforms that we typically support, like Vanta and Drata, to pump out even more value, which is good for us as implementers, right?
100%. We love to see innovation at every stage here. And it also does merit saying that this was an individual who has a very, very well-respected track record in the industry and is going after much harder things than SOC 2, I'll tell you that. And for him to be taking a serious look at this, I do think warrants a bit of a discussion and looking a little bit deeper into this and seeing how is this going to play over the long run.
Right.
So I guess with all that being said, right, we're in this messy space right now with all these things happening. How should we be thinking about the race to achieve compliance frameworks quickly, to do it cheaper? What should a business be thinking about as they're in the middle of this and they say, hey, I don't really know too much about compliance. I know that I have to get it because I'm being asked to get it. Should you bite? Should you take the bait, or how should you approach this?
Yeah. I mean, I think the benefit of everybody having different AI chatbots and stuff like that today is you can do a lot of the research on your own. Or I should say, you should probably start there. I think Google honestly feels a little bit antiquated by now. I mean, just like that's a Google search, right? And I think doing some quick chat GPTing around, hey, what does it usually take to achieve this? What are the typical costs associated with it? What are the typical tools? What about this? What about that? And just start being very curious. Using those tools will probably get you pretty far. And my guess is that most of these chat GPTs are not going to say, yes, SOC 2 costs $4,000 to achieve. They might say that, they might have some context as to, there's some new entrants to do that, but this is typically a larger initiative, especially depending on the company size, right? It might be different for that YC-backed company of 3 people to use tools like this, but I guarantee you that a 100,000 person or even a 2,000 person or a 500 person company probably isn't using a lot of those tools and probably aren't using like a fraudulent. I mean, my guess, right, is that most of them probably aren't using a fraudulent audit farm, right? So I'd probably start there. And I think the next thing I would do is when you have an implementer or GRC platform or whatever, I think the very first thing I would do to your customer is say, hey, I have this letter of attestation from an auditor that I've engaged with, that we are going through the process, or we have begun the process, right, where we're financially engaged. I would show them that we have a GRC platform. And if you're using an MSP, I would also get a attestation letter from your MSP as well, who might be helping you with the implementation of either security or compliance or both, right? And I think that's a good starting point for being able to prove compliance, that you've at least engaged or starting the journey. And I think most vendors will sort of say that's good enough. Obviously, that's a little bit different for things like CMMC. But I think if you're a smaller company and you're going after or your vendor is only asking for a framework like SOC 2, which is relatively simple or easier compared to more prescriptive frameworks, then I think that's a good strategy.
Yeah, I would also add there, it's good, even if you don't plan on using them, to just speak to different people about this, right? Say, hey, here's kind of what I'm thinking about my plan. What do you think about that? Because the people that actually care about the space or passionate about the space, they will push back on you on certain aspects there. You can go and find people that would be happy to give their 2 cents about what your plan is. There's tons of networks across LinkedIn. There's tons of MSPs, MSSPs that are out there who will be happy just to take a call. And at least from our perspective, we do that all the time, right? Somebody says, hey, here's what I want to do. And we say, hey, I think you're good, man. Or we'll say, oh, you're trying to do this in 4 weeks. I think we need to take a step back and rework this sort of thing. So it's always helpful to talk to people who are actually knowledgeable in the space.
Like if you have time, like go talk to an auditor, go talk to MSP, go talk to I doubt a lot of people have friends who've done this unless you're already like in the IT space and you're an IT person, yourself. But if you can go find someone who's done this before, they will tell you firsthand, for year 1 and 2 kind of sucked. And there's a lot of people that we've talked to that are like in year 7 or 9 of doing this themselves. And they're like, all right, I've mostly got it on autopilot by now. But when you're doing this for the first time and you also have a deadline, it's usually a different story.
Yeah. One bit of advice that I could give is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Like most things in life, huh?
Yeah. It's kind of like the fitness analogy. You're trying to get in shape, you're trying to lose 20 pounds, build some muscle, etc. If you're at the store and you see big signs that you should take this pill, probably shouldn't take that pill, because it's not going to really get you where you want to go. And I think the same thing holds true with compliance. Intuitively, if you know that your IT is not up to par with where it should be, you should be very skeptical if something is very fast and very cheap, because it's probably not very good.
I am honestly on the edge of my seat as to who these vendors end up being, because I've got lots of ideas who, but like honestly, like I might just be surprised by who it'll end up. But I feel like a lot of the players in the space have some ideas of who it might be. So yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. We'll report back. I'm sure this is not the last that we'll hear of this.
That is another episode of Trust Issue. In this conversation, help you think differently about compliance, security, or trust. Share it to help someone who is still stuck in a checkbox mode. Each week, we will keep bringing you more episodes, resources, and real-world insight from the BEMO team. Wherever you are listening from, don't forget to rate the podcast and follow us to stay up to date on the latest development in the GRC space. Remember, compliance gets you certified, but real security, that earns trust. Thank you for listening.